think the worst was when I was taking that overnight Greyhound bus in New York, Manhattan. They wouldn't let me on the bus, and the bus driver was saying, it's too big. You can't take this bass on the bus. And I was like, I have to make this gig. I need the $100. I'm getting on this bus. I've always taken this overnight bus. And he was like, no, you're not getting on the bus. And I was like, you don't understand, sir. I have to get on this bus. So he took the bass and he literally threw it into the lower cabinet.
It was such a pleasure to have today's guest on the show and check out her latest album and her other albums she's done, and really fascinating career. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are talking today with Brandi Disterheft, who just released her latest album, Surfboard, featuring tenor sax legend George Coleman and Brazilian drummer Portinho. So we talk about that album, her growing up in Vancouver, what that was like, moving to Toronto, taking the Greyhound to study with Ron Carter in New York City, eventually moving to New York City to work with Ron Carter, and so many other topics. Wonderful conversation. Definitely check out Surfboard. We've got that linked up too in the show notes. Quick shout out to our sponsors, Dorico, Ear Trumpet Labs, Practisma, and Modacity. More on them later, but let's get into this conversation with Brandi Disterheft. How's New York these days?
Well, I'm uptown, and it's getting a little, it's changing. The city seems to be empty, and the subways are quite empty. So try not to take the subway too late at night after the gigs.
Yeah.
But there's also a big sense of community when we've been doing these like outdoor sort of sponsored concerts, and everyone's trying to help each other out. So that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, I've been hearing that, talking to some people in New York City, which is pretty cool. You know, I live in San Francisco, and so we have the advantage of it being nicer out as it gets cooler. But we've had live music start to come back a bit. It's been funny because actually some of the venues, the only people inside the venue are the band. Everybody else is outside. I don't know if you've done any gigs. Have you done gigs like that?
No, I haven't. But
okay.
Yeah, there's a couple of venues that are doing that.
Okay. Yeah, and I've seen some things where it's like outside. I don't know what people are planning on doing as it gets colder. I know that's an issue, but you know, like in parking lots or that sort of thing. So it's great to hear that you're doing some playing. That's come back a little.
Yeah, well, and we have 25% capacity right now. Uh-huh. So I got my 2 steadies back, my regular Tuesday, my regular Thursday gig. So that's great, just to be playing.
Did you have I'm guessing you had a big chunk of time where you didn't do any playing, right? If you're like most people.
Yeah. So as a bass player, when we came back, you know, you had the bleeding and the blisters.
Yeah.
But that time was really useful to be writing, and of course to launch the CD, because I already had the album in the can. And, you know, as bass players, we play every night. It's really busy. So that was sort of a blessing to take time off. Yeah.
Now, okay, so you already had the album done. I was curious about that. I love it, by the way. I was listening to Surfboard and running with my dog this morning along the waterfront, and it's really cool.
Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate that. Yeah, I wanted to do a Brazilian album because when I first moved to New York about 10 years ago, I met Portinho, who's known as the definitive Brazilian drummer, and he's in his 80s, and he has such a unique repertoire, and so I wanted to add some of my own songs and just showcase, you know, that sound.
Yeah. It's super cool. I've enjoyed the whole album, and I love doing chats like this. It's like an invitation to go into someone's back catalog. So it's been fun to listen through some of what you've done. I love that on Broadway groove. That's such a cool groove that you got, that like super laid back feel with you and the drummer. It's really just a lovely. I mean, I like all of it, but that track, I was really just enjoying listening to that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and it's funny because the lyrics are actually a little dark.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And so the sort of somber, slow-moving, bluesy aspect fits well.
Mm-hmm. It looked like you were on the road a ton the last few years. Like if we pretend 2020 didn't happen, what percentage of the time had you been on the road the last few years? It looks like quite a bit.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I've gone out with various bands. Mm-hmm. I remember, I guess it was 2 years ago, I think I went around the world like 3 times, just always on that plane. But because I haven't put out an album in the last like 4 years under my own name, it's been not as much. That's why we were hoping to go out more.
Yeah.
But that will be postponed for a bit.
For sure. Well, it looks like you might have. Do you have any dates? It's great that you have those 2 regulars back. I'm guessing nobody knows what's going on in terms of 2021 dates or anything like that.
Yeah, I have a Quebec City date in April. That was supposed to be November, and we'll see if that happens. And then that's when I wanted to launch the tour off that. A few of those anchor dates. But at this point, we just still don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Do you ever make it out to San Francisco? I didn't see any SF Jazz dates or anything in the last few years. Do you head out here?
No, I would love to.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let me know if you make it. They've got SF Jazz is relatively new. I think it's about 5 years old, and they have two performance venues. They have this little one that is all glass looking out on the street, so it's a pretty cool. And that's usually where the bass players play. so I saw Larry Grenadier maybe a year and a half ago there playing the Gleaners, and then I saw Katie Thoreau, who's a bassist and vocalist, out here in California, play a show. But that's a really cool. I think that's the only. I don't remember its distinction, but it's one of the few solely dedicated to jazz venues there is in the country, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's jazz at Lincoln Center and that, but this place is exclusively jazz, which is pretty cool.
Right. Very cool.
Yeah. And you're from this region vaguely, aren't you? From Vancouver?
Vancouver.
Okay.
Yes, West Coast.
And
I miss it much.
Oh, do you? Okay, I was curious. Yeah, because it's Vancouver's a different kind of West Coast than San Francisco, but they have a lot in common still. It's do you like the snow? I guess you get a lot more of it in New York.
Yeah, well, Vancouver doesn't really have snow because it's still the rainforest, but all the skiing and the sailing and the fishing and the clean air and the outdoors mentality and the island hopping, and it's just different, right?
It's beautiful. I have a lot of family in Seattle and spent a lot of time there as a kid. And my brother lives in Portland, so I'm in that region of the world a lot. Yeah, there's something special about it, and the clean air. And I love New York, and I lived 23 years in Chicago, so I'm sort of used to that kind of. Yeah, and your mom's from Chicago, right? Yeah,
that whole side of the family, they're from there. So
okay, how did people end up in Vancouver then?
Well, so my mom married a Canadian. She was on the road, and she met my dad, who was selling Shure microphones.
Oh, hey!
And he was a Canadian, so he brought her up to Vancouver.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you? So what's? I feel like a fool for having never visited Vancouver. I don't know why I haven't gotten up there. I will. But what's the musical scene like? I've heard it's an incredible town in so many different ways. But what's the jazz scene like? What's the music scene like in general there?
Yeah, it's wonderful. So, we have our claim to fame, like Seamus Blake is from there, and Renee Rosnes is from there, and Ingrid Jensen, of course, Anna Krall. And there's a big pocket of wonderful jazz education. And we have our, big name players, and, it's a very small scene, but there's, very acclaimed players. There's also a wonderful free scene. And so it's very vibrant.
Oh.
And then, of course, there's the Vancouver Jazz Festival and the Victoria Jazz Festival, and then all the little festivals in between. And there's the 2 big universities there to study. So, yeah.
So did you...
And, it's funny. Some people from Seattle actually move up to Vancouver to be part of that scene. So that's really nice.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah, I got to get up there. What came first for you? Was it voice? Was it? I know you got started young.
Yeah, so I started on piano.
Okay,
it was sort of mandatory in the household that we start at 5 and go through the Royal Conservatory, and then at 13 I switched to bass. And then I always my aunt in a Grammy-winning session singer in Los Angeles. She worked with Joe Beam and Claire Fisher for years. And so I always grew up wanting to sound like her. But in college, I was more purist and thought, oh, no. I was really into ECM at that time. I was like, no, I just want to play bass. And then as you go on the road more and more and you're writing more, you sort of want to express yourself. And so then I really took on the singing.
Did you ever think, I mean, coming from a musical household like that, was there anything else that crossed your mind that you were going to do, or did you know it was music from when you were a little kid?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I was thinking journalism. I like writing, and I was pretty strong in the, Englishes and that. And but I received a scholarship to go study in Toronto at Humber College, and so, I think I thought, oh, maybe I'll do that for a year. Because my dad was in the music business and he thought that wouldn't be a very good idea. He saw like really talented musicians struggling. So he's like, well, just do it for a year and then you can, go back and study something else. And then, of course, when you're thick in it and you're practicing hours and hours, you're like, just one more year and I'll get it, right? And then 3 years later, just one more year and I'll be able to master this. And, of course, that never happens.
People have been saying such great things about my course with Discover Double Bass Beginners Classical Bass. Here is Nicholas Walker, professor of double bass at Ithaca College and past president of the International Society of Bassists. Nicholas writes, Jason draws from this vast network with his contagious enthusiasm and love of learning. Presented through the beautifully organized and easily accessible framework of Discover Double Bass, this is a terrific learning experience for any beginner, as well as a great model for any new teacher. I am blushing, Nicholas. Thank you so much. I'm just so thrilled with how this course came out. Jeff Chalmers and the whole team at Discover Double Bass are so professional. It was such a great experience, and it was the best representation of what I would love to take every single beginner through in terms of format and presentation, and I'm just so happy that it's out there. You can learn more. We've got a link in the show notes, or you can just visit discoverdouble.com/Jason Heath. This episode is brought to you by Ear Trumpet Labs. They make hand-built mics out of Portland, Oregon, and they have an excellent mic for upright bass called Nadine. The Nadine is a condenser mic with a clear, natural sound and incredible feedback rejection. This mic is a completely new design. The head mounts in between the strings above the tailpiece with a rubber grommet, and the body securely straps to the tailpiece with Velcro elastic. A 14-inch Mogami cable connects the two parts, making it easy to place on any bass. It's durable and holds up to the demanding needs of the instrument while offering excellent sound quality. Ear Trumpet Labs is offering a free t-shirt just for Contrabass Conversations listeners with the purchase of a mic. Just visit www.eartrumpetlabs.com/contrabass to claim yours and check out the Nadine. How I'm all my Canadian ignorance is revealing itself. The only place I've ever spent in Canada, I feel like such a fool, is a little bit of Windsor and like Sault Ste. Marie. I grew up in the Midwest, and so we would take trips up there. I think I had to go to the dentist. Sault Ste. Marie's beautiful. Yeah. I think I actually had an emergency like when I was like 8 years old or something in Sault Ste. Marie. So I have weird memories of there. But I remember. But so like Toronto's, there's another place that I have yet to visit for no good reason. But how long were you in Toronto, and what's this? Yeah,
I was there 10 years. Toronto's great. So Toronto has the biggest population. You could say it's like the New York of, Canada. And you can work every night. They have a little bit of the recording scene, the session scene there, and lots of clubs. So it's wonderful. And of course you have the commerce, which supports some of the more private events and things like that. And then Montreal, of course, is very, very strong. Mm-hmm. And they're almost quite purist. They have in Rimouski this like free jazz festival. And so, I mean, every part is different. Even the prairies have a very strong music, education system. And then the East Coast is just beautiful. Mm-hmm. It's these fishing villages, and they have jazz festivals out there, and it's just quite diverse. Coming from Vancouver, of course, you're not going to like Toronto as much because there's a lot of concrete and there's a lot of traffic, and it's just different. And it's very cold. Vancouver is kind of where you want to end up if you want the better weather.
For sure.
Yeah.
Here's a weird. This probably doesn't work at all as an analogy, but it might kind of. It almost reminds me a little bit of Australia, the way you have these large population centers, and then you're vastly separated, right? Like by these Calgary, the distance from Calgary to Toronto. It reminds me of Melbourne to Sydney to Perth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Vancouver to Calgary, that's just like one province over, what you guys would call one state over. That's like a 17-hour drive.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's massive. Yeah, massive.
Now, did you go then? It was 10 years in Toronto, and then was New York your next stop from there?
Yeah, so I wanted to study with Ron Carter.
Yeah.
And so I was taking that Greyhound bus back, overnight Greyhound bus back for about a year. Because I didn't do the master's there. And so I had completed, my undergrad and just attending jam sessions and trying to meet people. And then, and then eventually began studying with Mr. Carter and just meeting people and playing.
Mm-hmm. I'm a huge Mr. Carter fan, of course, and I've actually had him on the podcast like 5 years ago or something like that. But and I've talked with people who've studied with him for sure. But maybe one of these days I'm going to just compile everybody's experiences of studying with Mr. Carter and put out an episode. Mm-hmm. Can you just talk a little bit about what Ron Carter, Mr. Carter, is like as a teacher? What those experiences were like?
Yeah, I would say his personality is very much like his bass playing. So he's very refined. Mm-hmm. He's very inspiring to be around. He would say, Brandi, I don't want it right the first time. I want it right 5 times in a row. And he would, being a female playing, I think I always wanted the biggest sound ever to prove, I can play, I'm not timid. And he would be like, Brandi, stop playing so loud. I don't want my neighbors to hear you. So then I'm hardly playing the string. And he's like, Brandi, I told you, I don't want my neighborhood to hear you. So he really gets you to have this light, refined sound, sort of the least amount of energy and the biggest sound, which of course is useful when you're playing, 100 choruses very fast. So I went to study with him because he could get rid of the iron fist, and I knew he was a real teacher. He has a method.
Did you feel yourself having more stamina on gigs as you started to adopt that?
Absolutely.
Because that's one of those things that my background, I'm like a novice jazz player. Classical is definitely my thing. I sub in the San Francisco Symphony and the like. And so it's funny. Wow. I just think about the difference in endurance that takes as a bass player. Because, you're playing with a bow or whatever, but then I'm sitting for a movement. I'm not playing at all. I've got 32 bars of rest versus basically you're playing every single pulse of every single tune, more or less, right? As a jazz bassist. Yeah.
Well, and I guess you build the stamina up for it, but definitely on those fast tunes, you had to be economic about it. Mm-hmm. So that was completely useful. I remember after I started studying with him, then I landed the gig with Vincent Herring, who of course played with Cedar Walton and all those guys. So we made a couple records up at Smoke, the hard bop scene, and right away, they just play real fast. So you have to be able to do that.
Right.
Yeah, it's a different thing. I think the medium tempos, you can dig in a little more, and but definitely those up tempos.
I was talking years ago, probably 20 years ago at this point or something, but a bassist named Mike Arnapol in Chicago. He's been Patricia Barber's bassist for years and years.
Oh,
he was,
great.
Yeah, he was talking about how he realized he was not quite engaging the arm the way he wanted to, and he was just really more using his index finger. And he went to the doctor and he was having all these hand problems. And it's funny how subtle the shift was. It's no, you're just doing a little bit too much of first finger and not quite enough of the arm. But that compounded over 4-hour gigs, however many nights a week, it's amazing what just a little refinement like that it can be injury or no injury. It sounds like.
Yeah, well, you can't say no pain, no gain. I mean, if you feel pain, that's a bad thing. Mr. Carter would also have us hold a cork in your right hand in the pinky and fourth finger so that you're sort of using 2 fingers, right? So that's going to be more powerful than just 1 finger. Mm-hmm. So again, less effort, bigger sound. Just these little things.
It's so interesting to me how many different approaches to the right hand jazz bassists have. There's a video from Jamie Aebersold camp a few years ago that bass player named Chris Fitzgerald put together. It had Rufus Reed and Lynn Seaton and a whole bunch of different people, all showing their distinctive way. And it's like, there are a few variances in French bow hold, German bow hold, but nothing like what I was seeing with the 7 players, 7 fairly different ways of approaching the string.
Yeah, this spring I went back to some of the videos and I was analyzing, older Sam Jones and Paul Chambers and Jimmy Garrison, I think maybe Wilbur Ware, and it seemed like they all had the same, like just one finger, from that certain time period. Even Ray Brown, one finger, if he was doing like a couple lines, and he'd use 2 fingers. But that now with the more modern bass playing, I think people definitely use 2 fingers. And of course, Niels Henning, Oscar Pettiford used 3 or 4.
Yeah. I remember those Pablo records being like a revelation, the Oscar Peterson and Niels Henning, and just that totally blew my mind when I was in college. Listening to that.
That's right.
That's a beautiful thing about something like YouTube these days, right? You can actually look at all these great players like Jimmy Garrison and Ray Brown and just back to back and see how people approach the bass, and then how more contemporary people approach the bass too.
That's right.
Yeah. How did you meet George Coleman, who is prominently featured on this latest album? How did that come about?
So my last album was with Harold Mayburn. May he rest in peace, who we've lost now. And so I was on the road. I would, be one of the bass players for the Harold Mayburn Trio. And of course, after making my record, I took him on the road too. So it was a nice reciprocal relationship. So George Coleman and Harold Mayburn were school friends, school boys together in Memphis. So George had heard about me. And then, to try and meet with him and get to know him better, I said, Mr. Coleman, can I come over and, have a lesson? I'd like to work on the double diminished. And so we went over and he showed me some wonderful harmony things, and he was really complimentary and said, well, you can really play. And then I wanted to make this Brazilian album, so I thought, in a way, it's almost like Stan Getz and those famous, Brazilian albums, but to have the wonderful George Coleman, like, what a sound.
Yeah.
And George is so special because he's quite obviously he's a virtuoso. I mean, it's almost like Coltrane sheets of sound. He's like a harmonic genius. But at the same time, what blows me away is how relaxed he is. On those ballads, it's this true gentleman, like 80 years of, it's so romantic. It's very, very special.
Yeah,
he also has this old Memphis mentality on the bandstand where he'll, call tunes that, the players have never played, and then all of a sudden he'll switch the key from B flat up a half step to B, and then pass off the solo to someone else. And you see the guys, they're also big names. They're just like scrambling. So that's the old school sort of. I love that, keeping people on their toes.
This episode is brought to you by Dorico, the advanced music notation software from Steinberg. And one of the features that perplexed me at first, and then I realized its brilliance, is their concept of flows. Here is Daniel Spreadbury, Senior Product Manager, on what flows are and how they work.
The ability to have multiple exercises or multiple songs or whatever, it's so obvious because music is very rarely just one through composed bit from start to end, whether it's a show or a symphony or a sonata or a songbook or whatever. Music's in sections. That's just how it works.
That is how it works, but that's not how most music notation software works. And the ability to break things up like that, oh my goodness. When I'm creating exercises or anything of the sort for my students or any sort of project that I have going, that makes organization so much easier. Exporting is a breeze. Everything that you do in Dorico is beautiful from the get-go, which is really cool coming from other pieces of software. Check them out at Dorico.com. That'll take you to their site on Steinberg's website. And they have a free product called Dorico SE where you can do practically everything that you can in the full version of Dorico for up to 2 parts. That's more than enough if you're doing bass duets or anything of the like. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Dorico. Keeping track of what you practice is so critical. And my practice companion, Modacity, it does it for me. It's so awesome. Here's Modacity founder and CEO Mark Gelfo on how this works.
Accounting before the spreadsheet was manually handwritten ledgers, and that's where most musicians have been for the last 200 years. And it's time to automate that and save some time and let people focus on what's really important, which is performing on their instrument.
And that is exactly what Modacity has done for me. I feel so much more focused and energized and enthusiastic about practicing. I love this app so much. You can learn more at modacity.co and visit our website for a special offer for lifetime access for this app. Such a cool piece of technology. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Modacity. Yeah, sink or swim. Nothing like soloing in B major. And they that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lick that really reminded me of like the beginning of Love Supreme on one of the ballads. George Coleman went into one of those Gary Coltrane-esque. I'm forgetting. I was on my run, so I wasn't looking at my phone. I forget what track it was, but that's
probably
really cool.
The ballad "My Foolish Heart." Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. How cool is that? So when did this, has it been 5 years since the idea came to you for this album? Or like when did the idea pop into your mind?
I've been playing with Portinho, the drummer, since I moved to New York. So almost a good 10 years, I think. So I always wanted to record that sound. Mm-hmm. So, we always have albums in our head and then some get made and some don't, but I really wanted to do this one.
Do you have a few? I just find it, I always love seeing someone finally ship something out, get it out the door, say it's done, we get out the door. Do you have, and if you're like a lot of people I talk to, you probably have a bunch of projects like in various stages of completion. Do you have some other things you've been thinking about in terms of albums over the past 5 years, 10 years, some projects that you've kind of been, on the back burner?
Yeah, no, I'm always writing. Mm-hmm. So always trying to sift out the bad tunes and only keep the good tunes. So I'm already writing. But nothing really on the back burner right now, just writing.
Well, when do you, I love how people spend their creative time, and it's just kind of interesting seeing, like, do you have like a regular writing practice? Like you sit down and you say, Brandi, I'm going to write. Is it like 10 a.m. or is it like total randomness, or do you try to do it on a daily, or just how does that work for you?
I'm a big practicer. So I love like going through the language on bass, and we're still working through the Ron Carter technique, working on some time and then learning new tunes. I'm really big into practicing. And then you have the vocal practice, I'm studying with an opera singer and trying to get that breath support and the sound. And then of course, learning new standards and songs, which of course takes twice as long because it's not just learning the bass. You have to do stuff, sing and play at the same time. So writing is more just really kind of when I feel like it. Lately I've been forcing myself, but often you have some anxiety, so I'll wake up at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and just like barrel through, just keep writing.
Sure.
The writing I guess is more therapeutic. So
Sure. But the practicing, and that's interesting to know, because I think when people see someone, it's like, oh, wow, Brandi's done all this, played with George Coleman, they might not necessarily realize that you've got that kind of a work ethic, that you're practicing like that. And, we're studying with an opera coach and playing on the bass. That's, are you a few hours a day? Are you doing that in the morning? Like, how does your day look like in terms of the work you're putting in on your musical craft?
Yeah, well, with the 2 regular gigs, you don't want to keep having to play the same songs. You want to break it up and work on certain tempos. And so like right now, like between Tuesday and Thursday, it's, I try and maybe take Sunday off, but like Monday, Tuesday, those are like definitely like for sure 4-hour practice days.
Wow.
And then Wednesday, the day off, and to practice more. And then, yeah, it's pretty steady for me. You know, in New York, there's so many, well, probably the big cities, there's so many great players. It's like you have goals and you want to really keep up. And I had a milestone birthday this year too, so there's no excuses, you know. I should be able to like blow through giant steps, no problem. Like there's no excuses anymore. So certain things like that.
Does that, I love New York. I've never lived there, but I try to go normally, not this year, but normally once a week a year and just see concerts and interview people and that kind of thing. But I've often wondered what it's like to be a jazz musician just with all that energy around you. I mean, there's really no other city like that for jazz. I think one can safely say. We got some pockets here and there in other areas of the world, but you know, but it also seems like I might be the kind of person that it would be very anxiety producing too, seeing all of these people like, and then that sort of New York hustle vibe, especially if you're coming from the West Coast, you know, it's
it's so thick. It's crazy. I've even seen some of like the older, well-reputed guys like talk on the phone. They're like, what? $500? Oh, come on. It's not $500. It's got to be at least $2,000. No, like they're just so aggressive.
Yeah.
And even when you're like, hey, how's it going? And you're not supposed to like toot your own horn, right? Oh, how is everything? Oh, everything's fine. Well, it's like, not everything's fine. I've done this. I've recorded with this. I'm playing here. It can be really quite overwhelming, but that's exciting too. And there's definitely a sense of community. There's a warmness.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there's all these jam sessions so you can meet people and hang with people. And then, you know, a lot of the older guys will like talk shop and cheer you on, and there's such a lineage, the stories. I remember I was playing out in the street when Biden won, and this famous bass player came, you know, and he was playing the bass and all these cool diminished licks, and he's like, well, this is what Wilbur Ware taught me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know who you are. And there's such a wonderful lineage.
Yeah.
So overall, it's inspiring.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's one thing I love about the East Coast in general. You'll know exactly what people think of you. That, you know, like people will tell you exactly what's on their mind. I always know where I stand with my New York friends, for better or worse. You know, at least here in San Francisco or California in general, you don't get that. It's very much like a little more of that passive aggressive kind of thing. Everybody seems real chill, but you know, so I love that energy. For sure, New York, East Coast in general, but New York in particular, and the jazz scene. That's how cool to like have some just person on the street give you Wilbur Ware lessons. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's truly.
Well, how do you unplug from that though? Because like that, I just feel like that, you know, that level of, you know, in your faceness, just as a creative person, that's got to be kind of exhausting.
No, you're right. It definitely is. I run. Mm-hmm. I play tennis. It's fun, you know, as a bass player, you get all sort of gigs. I've been for years doing some of the swing dancing scene, so that's really fun. But that's about it, really. Yeah. The exercise helps.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And, you know, just keeping yourself physically healthy on any instrument, but especially something like the bass, and especially on something where like, it's probably different now during COVID times, but typically you're probably like working late at night or late into the night, schlepping a bass around, sometimes in the cold.
So you get the 1:30 smalls calls. Yeah. And that's a great gig. Yeah.
Have you ever struggled with anything physically, just in terms of that, or is it just?
I had some shoulder pain just from carrying that bass on the subways. It's like I can really only do about like 20 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. I actually calorie counted because I'm on the lean side, and I've been trying to eat and eat and eat. And with this Apple Watch, I realized the other day I had 2 gigs, one in Brooklyn and one, you know, Midtown. And I counted, I burned like 550 calories going up those like 20 flights with the bass, which is a normal day. Like 2 gigs a day is quite normal. Yeah. So it just tells you how much energy you're burning. But I haven't had much problems. I used to, when I was younger and I was playing so hard, it used to hurt like on my right hand, you know, around the joints, but I don't play that hard anymore. And left hand, you know, it's been quite strong because of the classical training. So I just the shoulder from carrying it. The yoga is important, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Anything I've had physically, it's never been from the playing. It's always carrying the stinking thing. When I go play things here in San Francisco, I always walk. I just like the ridiculousness of not owning a car as a bass player, although I know that's normal in New York City.
You too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But so I also have the Apple Watch and I'm amazed at the, what you burn.
What you burn.
Yeah. Going around.
I'm just grabbing my charger. My apologies.
Oh yeah. No worries. No worries. So a lot of young people listen to this, teenagers, people in their early 20s, and it's hard to make it in music at any point. Certainly, coronavirus doesn't help things. And as an independent artist, obviously they're different. It sounds like you've been immersed in music ever since you were a little kid in the musical family. And do you ever give talks at colleges or do sessions for young people, or I guess I'm just curious, like, what advice might someone in your position give to someone who was 17, 18, starting to think about maybe, Brandi's doing interesting work. I'd love to do what she does. I'd love to play with George Coleman or somebody like that. What, and I know it generally things look real tidy in the rearview mirror and it's like total chaos in the moment. But any advice you might give to somebody young who's like starting college or ending high school and they look to you as an inspiration, but they don't even have the slightest hint of where to begin?
Right. I think I was lucky early on because I had a few teachers, and of course from playing with my mom, I knew had memorized a lot of songs, and that helps when you go to jam sessions and just learning a song a day, memorizing it numerically, so you can change keys at a drop of a dime, and trusting your ears. It seems like nowadays the kids bring up their phones and they're reading the real book. But, we were always trying to get away from the real book. You have to memorize that because that gives you a lot of opportunities. If you know tunes, you'll get on the bandstand. Yeah. Once you're on the bandstand, you'll get more work. Once you're working, that will help a lot. And I also was on the piano since I was little, and my mom also taught me some jazz harmony. But then after college, I took private piano lessons, and that helped immensely because as a bass player, even your major 2/5s or your minor 2/5s, you can get away with a lot with actually not knowing harmony and how it works. And so I think that is also so important, and that helps with your writing too. It just opens everything up.
One of the most popular courses I went to Northwestern University in Chicago, and one of the most popular courses in music was taught by a jazz pianist named Mike Coker, and it was jazz piano for the non-pianist. And it was like just absolutely, even if you didn't have the chops, which obviously that helps so much to have some piano facility in anything in music, but jazz in particular. So that's very. I've got a question about the tune learning. I remember back when I always took jazz improv classes and that kind of thing back in college. And that same teacher, Mike Coker, he would always have us go through and memorize a tune in 12 keys, take it through everything. Did you do that when you were learning tunes, or do you do that? Or do you just kind of associate the numbers with the melody or chord changes or however you think of it? Yeah,
I mean, I'll take a lick or a line or some language I like through the keys. Cherokee, Harold Mayburn's big thing was like every A section, you change up a half a key. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just think of stuff numerically off the bat, so it doesn't even matter. Okay. Some songs you can't think numerically though. Yeah. But those aren't really going to get called in numerous keys. Right, sure. Yeah. So I never really did that, but I definitely, even on the bandstand, when someone's trying to teach me a song, and they're like, E minor is going to F sharp to B, I'm like, why are you saying that? 1 goes to 4, 3, 6, 2, 5 to the up minor third. It's so easy, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. That's how I do it.
It even takes less time to say, if you think about it, right?
True. Good point. Yeah, B doesn't sound like E.
Right.
Mind you, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I something I think about, again, in more normal times, I do a lot of travel for events and, different type of travel, what you're doing, but still travel. And I always love checking out different audiences in different parts of the world. Do you have any favorite places you like to play in? Like, I remember my first time playing in Japan, and I was playing orchestral music, but I just remember thinking, whoa, what happened? Because I was so used to Chicago, where they do I call it the Chicago style standing ovation, where half of them would clap and half of them would be like pushing each other out of the way to get out of the building. And like Japan was like the polar opposite. Do you have any favorite either venues or cities or countries that you've played?
Yeah, I mean, we had a nice Haiti was really fun.
Whoa, really? You played in Haiti?
Yeah,
wow.
And then I had written this song with sort of a calypso beat, and then I remember everybody started like singing along, and screaming, which was really sweet.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Have you ever played in Cuba or been to Cuba?
I got called to make a record in Cuba, but I also was invited to play in Fiji.
Oh.
And the Fiji gig paid like 5 times more. But I've always wanted to go to Cuba. In Canada, there's quite a few wonderful Cuban musicians that were, of course, classically trained, and then they knew all the bebop, all the Bud Powell, and then they could play all the modern harmony.
Wow.
And in Cuba, they say they don't believe in perfect pitch. You have to learn perfect pitch or you'll fail. And here, of course, we don't believe that. We believe there's only relative pitch.
Right.
A friend of mine was explaining, it's like when the computer comes on, it's like, that beginning sound, that's how you memorize. You affiliate every pitch with a song.
Wow.
I mean, it is interesting.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's well, luckily Cuba's a lot easier to get to on the political challenges, but the distance wise it's not too bad. I used to be a high school orchestra director, and I took an orchestra to Cuba in 2016. And it's funny because it was the same exact week that Obama was in Cuba and the Rolling Stones were in Cuba. Of course, I'd planned it a year before, so I had no idea, but that was the coolest trip. We were playing outside in the streets of Havana, and this cellist was playing a solo, and there was a dog eating a dead bird in front of him, and then there were like trucks going by and people on the roof listening to the concert. I think there was a wedding going on across the street. It was just the most
wild.
Wild, and just that was one of the most incredible experiences, especially being so close to the U.S. Right? I mean, that's what everybody says about Cuba, but it really hits you. You're like, I could be 6,000 miles away from the United States, culturally, and then just the musical culture is so fascinating. So well, Fiji's a good choice too, though. If you got so
that's pretty great.
These are some of my favorite questions for people that tour a lot. Any low points? The bass is lost. You're like heart attack inducing turbulence heading into New Zealand. Any traumatizing moments on the road that stick out to you?
Well, yes, but you try and always give a strong face. I think the worst was when I was taking that overnight Greyhound bus in New York, Manhattan. They wouldn't let me on the bus, and the bus driver was saying, it's too big. You can't take this bass on the bus. And I was like, I have to make this gig. I need the $100. I'm getting on this bus. I've always taken this overnight bus. And he was like, no, you're not getting on the bus. And I was like, you don't understand, sir. I have to get on this bus. So he took the bass and he literally threw it into the lower cabinet. I was like, great. I made it on the bus. And then 12 hours later, you arrive in Toronto and the bass was all Limp Bizkit.
Oh, yeah.
And there was wood chips everywhere.
Oh,
and I just cried, even though we're not supposed to cry.
Yeah, well, that deserves a cry. That's rough. I had one of those coming back from an audition. They put it through the regular baggage carousel and not the oversized. So I'm looking and it was an incline ramp. So I see my bass bridge side down, neck first, like some giant ship. And then it landed, crashed, people scattered. I opened it up, shattered. So it can happen.
Yeah.
Do you typically, when you're traveling, do you typically always bring a bass, or do you borrow on the road sometimes?
Yeah, never. We never. I actually sold my flight case, and we never take it. I have my good bass into a collapsible, and I never take that. Mm-hmm. It's always backline.
Okay.
Which is frustrating if it's a D neck, E flat neck. Yeah. Hopefully it has adjusters, but it's just what it is.
Oh, yeah.
I love it because then you're not schlepping.
Yeah, your life all of a sudden becomes that of a flute player or something, you know?
Right. You got it.
Yeah, no, I never bring, after 9/11, I just decided I'm never bringing a bass unless some organization is bringing it on a truck for me. That's fine. But I just borrow and I bring my bow and it's great. So I'm curious.
That's great.
Yeah, does it? But the D, E flat neck is a real concern. If the strings are too high or it's just a garbage bass, I guess that's a concern. But you just kind of muscle through.
You can't. Yeah, if it's the action is, and we're talking sometimes the action is like very, very high, which is so fun for the swing dancing gigs.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to play some faster Oscar Pettiford lines or songs, you can't. It just makes it near impossible.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I hope you get a chance to get back on the road sooner rather than later. And I love the album, and I'm looking forward to more morning runs with my dog, listening to Surfboard.
You're so sweet. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate it. I'll link up to your site, your Instagram, the album. Anywhere else you want me to send people?
Yeah, we have some wonderful videos on YouTube for Surfboard. And the YouTube's really nice.
Okay, beautiful. I'll link up to your YouTube and I'll link up to some of the videos too. Brandi, this has been fun. Anytime you have anything on the horizon and you want to hop on the podcast, the door's open. I have people on multiple times. I'm talking to a woman in the Denver Symphony in a couple hours. I think this is her 4th time on the podcast. So I'd love to.
Oh, so nice. And I hope to see you in San Francisco one of these days.
Brandi, thank you so much for chatting with me. Folks, check out Surfboard. It's an awesome album. We've got that linked up in the show notes along with her website, her social media, and I can't wait to check out the next project. Thank you so much for listening. If this is your first time checking out the podcast or you're relatively new to the show, welcome. We have an ever-growing archive approaching 800 episodes. Been doing this for 13 years, covering people from all corners of the globe, all corners of the music world, bassists and non-bassists, and exploring topics in all different kinds of ways. ContrabassConversations.com is the website, and through that you can subscribe in any platform that you listen to podcasts on. You can check out our YouTube channel. You can get on our email list. You can download our app, which I always forget to talk about, but we do have an app for iOS and Android. What else can you do? We put a lot of content on Instagram, Facebook, all kinds of special projects. Definitely, though, the email list has been particularly vibrant. Is that a good word for an email list? Sure, why not? In the last few years, I credit that to my colleague Trevor Jones, who works with me on that and just kind of making the message that we're sending out here, or the story that we're telling, or whatever, however you want to frame it, just making that ever clearer. So email, social, podcast, YouTube, all that sort of stuff. It's just really satisfying for me personally, and it's been great working with the people that help me with this and work with me on this and many other projects. And it makes me feel better, certainly during a pandemic, to connect with other artists and see what's going on with them, where they are in their life. It is super satisfying to incorporate this into my life of travel that is not happening in 2020 or for the next years, probably. But thank you. That's all I got to say. I will thank the team who put this stuff together with me. They are Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Mitch Mooring, Trevor Jones, and Krista Copper. Mitch makes beautiful basses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Check him out on mitchmooring.com, his website. The theme music you hear on this and so much of my other content, that's Eric Hochberg jamming out with me 13 years ago, I guess, at this point. Eric's a fantastic bassist and artist and composer, band leader. EricHochberg.com is his website. I am your host, Jason Heath. Wow, that was a shorter outro than usual. Don't worry. I'll let it rip the next episode. Okay, and did I identify myself? I think so. Jason Heath, see you soon again for life. More life? Is that my tagline? More life on the low end of the spectrum. Oh, goodness.